The night sky over Nevada split open with fire. Jake stood on the porch of his small house and watched something massive fall from the heavens. It was not a meteor. Meteors did not change direction. This thing moved like it was trying to stay in the air, fighting against gravity until the very last moment. The impact shook the ground beneath his feet. A wall of dust rose in the distance, and Jake grabbed his truck keys without thinking. He had spent 15 years working as an aerospace engineer before the company closed down. Now he ran a salvage business in the middle of nowhere. But whatever had just crashed was not normal wreckage. He could feel it in his bones. 20 minutes later, he stood at the edge of a crater that stretched half a mile wide. In the center sat a ship. Not a plane, not a satellite. A ship that looked like nothing humans had ever built. Its hull was dark metal covered in strange symbols. Parts of it still glowed with fatting heat, and smoke rose from cracks along its surface. Lisa Vance arrived an hour later. She worked at the observatory 30 miles north, and she had tracked the object during its descent. Her face was pale as she climbed out of her car and looked at the wreckage. "It came from outside our solar system," she said. "I watched it on the sensors. It was in a battle up there, Jake. There were energy signatures I have never seen before." Jake walked closer to the ship. A section of the hull had broken open during the crash, and he could see inside. The interior was filled with technology that made no sense to him. Screens flickered with alien symbols. Tubes carried glowing liquid through the walls, and in the corridors he found the crew. They were not human. Their bodies were tall and thin with gray skin and 4 arms. Their faces had no noses, just slits where nostrils should be. All of them were dead. Some had wounds that looked like burns. Others had been crushed by falling debris. Whatever battle they had fought in space, they had already lost before they crashed. Ben Torres arrived with the morning sun. He was the town sheriff and a retired military colonel. Behind him came 3 black helicopters carrying government soldiers. Ben had made some calls during the night, and now the federal authorities wanted to lock everything down. "Everyone needs to step back," a soldier announced through a loudspeaker. "This area is now under quarantine." But Jake had already spent hours inside the ship. He had taken photographs of everything he could find, and he had discovered something important in what looked like the command center, a device that stored information. He had no idea how to read it, but he knew someone who might. 3 days later, Lisa cracked the first layer of the alien language. She worked without sleep, comparing symbols to patterns, testing theories until something clicked. The data device contained logs, personal records from the crew, and those records told a story that changed everything. The aliens called themselves Their ship was a warship, built to fight in a conflict that had lasted for centuries. But they were not the hunters. They were the prey. An empire called the Dominion had been conquering species across the galaxy for thousands of years. They had resisted longer than most, but their civilization was finally falling. This ship had fled from the final battle. The crew knew they could not win, so they ran. They ran until their engines failed and their weapons went cold. They ran until they found a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star, Earth. The logs made clear what the thought of humans. They had scanned the planet during their descent. They saw cities and machines, but nothing that impressed them. Humans were primitive, dangerous to themselves perhaps, but not to anyone else. They did not even consider asking for help. They simply crashed and died, hoping they would not bother following them to such an unimportant world. Jake read the translation 3 times. Each time he felt the same cold anger building in his chest. They had given up. They had looked at Earth and seen nothing worth saving, but they had also left behind their ship, their technology, their weapons. He called a meeting in the basement of the town library. Lisa came. Ben came. Amy came too, a young mechanic who had helped Jake with salvage jobs for the past 2 years. She had a gift for understanding how machines worked, even machines she had never seen before. The four of them sat around a table covered with photographs and notes. "The government wants to study the ship," Ben said. "They are talking about years of research, careful analysis, scientific review." "We do not have years," Lisa replied. She pulled up a chart on her laptop. "I found something else in the logs, a mention of protocol. When a target escapes, the Dominion sends scouts to track them. The expected pursuit. They crashed here because they thought Earth was too insignificant for them to care about. But if they do come looking and they find this ship, they will find us too." Amy leaned forward. "So what do we do? Hide the ship, bury it?" Jake shook his head. "No, we fix it." The room went quiet. Ben stared at him like he had lost his mind, but Lisa was nodding slowly, already running calculations in her head. "The ship is damaged," Jake continued. "The thought they were crashing on a worthless planet full of primitive creatures, but they were wrong. We have engineers, scientists, mechanics. We have people who spend their whole lives figuring out how things work and making them better. This ship is broken. Fine. Humans are good at fixing broken things." It took 3 months of arguments, but in the end the government agreed. The turning point came when deep space sensors detected movement at the edge of the solar system. Small objects, traveling fast, heading toward Earth. Scouts, just as Lisa had predicted. Suddenly, the research timeline did not matter anymore. Project Rebirth began the next day. And Jake, the salvage operator from a small town in Nevada, became the lead engineer on the most important construction project in human history. They had abandoned their ship on Earth because they thought humans were worthless. Now those worthless humans were going to prove them wrong. 5 years passed. The crash site in Nevada became something else entirely. Engineers dug deep into the Earth and built a facility that stretched for miles underground. The alien ship sat at the center like a heart waiting to beat again. Around it, thousands of workers spent their days trying to understand technology that should have been impossible. Jake walked through the main hangar every morning. He had changed in those 5 years. His hair had turned gray at the edges. Lines had formed around his eyes from too many sleepless nights, but his determination had only grown stronger. Every problem they solved brought them closer to their goal. Every failure taught them something new. Danny Cole met him at the entrance to the engineering section. Danny was the lead structural engineer, a quiet man who spoke more with blueprints than words. He had rebuilt the entire frame of the ship using a combination of alien alloys and human steel. The result was stronger than either material alone. "We finished the hull repairs last night," Danny said. "She is solid now, stronger than she was when they built her." Jake nodded and kept walking. The hull was important, but it was not the real problem. The real problem sat in the center of the ship, cold and silent. The power core. Price was waiting for him in the control room. She had been the director of Project Rebirth since the beginning. Before that, she ran missions for the space agency. She understood both the science and the politics of what they were trying to do. Without her, the project would have been shut down a dozen times. "Chris has something to show you," she said. Her voice was calm, but Jake could see worry in her eyes. Chris was the youngest member of the senior team. He was only 27, but he had done something no one else could do. He had fully decoded the language. Every symbol, every grammar rule, every hidden meaning. The logs that once looked like random shapes now read like books. They found Chris in his office, surrounded by screens filled with alien text. He looked like he had not slept in days. When he saw Jake enter, he stood up and pointed to the largest screen. "I found something buried in the secondary logs," Chris said. "Something they did not want anyone to find. They sabotaged their own ship." Jake felt the words hit him like a punch. "What do you mean?" "The power core. It has a fail-safe built into its basic programming. They installed it before they fled. If anyone tries to activate the core without the correct authorization codes, it will not start. They wanted to make sure that even if their ship was captured, it would never fly again." Closed her eyes. They would rather let it rot than let anyone else use it. Jake stared at the screen. 5 years of work, thousands of people giving everything they had, and they had rigged the whole thing to fail from the start. They had looked at Earth, decided humans were worthless, and then made sure their ship would never help anyone. The anger he had felt on that first night came back, but this time it was different. This time it felt like fuel. "Can we break the fail-safe?" he asked. Chris shook his head. "The code is built into the core itself. We would have to rebuild the entire power system from scratch, and we do not understand energy technology well enough to do that." Jake turned and walked out of the room. He did not speak to anyone for the rest of the day. He just walked through the facility, looking at the ship, thinking about the problem from every angle. That night, he found Amy in her workshop. Amy had grown too. She was no longer just a small-town mechanic. She had become one of the best engineers on the project, with a talent for combining different technologies in ways nobody expected. Her workshop was filled with experiments, half-finished devices that mixed human and alien parts. "I heard about the fail-safe," she said. "Everyone is talking about giving up." Jake sat down across from her. "What if we do not need the core?" Amy raised an eyebrow. "The core is the whole point. Without it, the ship has no power." "The core has no power," Jake said. "But what about a human core?" He explained his idea. Human nuclear fusion technology had advanced significantly in the past decade. It was not as powerful as energy systems, but it worked. What if they could build a fusion reactor that connected to the alien systems, not replacing them entirely but working alongside them? A hybrid system. Amy listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was already sketching designs on her tablet. They worked for 6 months. The fusion reactor was built in a separate facility and transported piece by piece. Amy designed the connection systems, finding ways to make human technology communicate with alien circuits. Tyler Nash, the weapons specialist, helped adapt the power flow so it would reach all sections of the ship. The day of the first test, the entire senior team gathered in the control room. Jake stood at the main console with his hand on the activation switch, stood beside him. Lisa watched the sensor displays. Even Ben had come down from his position as head of ground defense to see if their work had been worth anything. Jake pressed the switch. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a deep hum filled the air. The lights on the console changed from red to green. The screens flickered and came to life. And somewhere in the heart of the ship, the hybrid power core began to glow. They had designed their ship to be useless, but humans had built something new, something better. Watched the reading stabilize and allowed herself a small smile. She needs a name. Jake thought about everything they had been through. The doubt, the setbacks, the refusal to quit even when the odds seemed impossible. "The Steadfast," he said. 3 hours later, the celebration ended. Alarms filled the control room as Lisa rushed to her station. The activation of the power core had sent a signal into space, a pulse of energy that traveled faster than light, and something had noticed. Lisa's voice was steady, but her face was pale. "I am tracking a fleet at the edge of the solar system, 47 ships. They are heading this way." Turn to face the team. "How long?" 18 months, maybe less." The room fell silent. They had brought the Steadfast back to life. Now they had to get ready for war. 12 months after the power core came to life, the Steadfast rose from the Nevada desert for the first time. The ship climbed slowly at first, shaking off years of repairs and modifications. Then it broke through the clouds and kept going. Within minutes, it had left Earth's atmosphere behind. Sam stood on the command deck and watched the planet shrink beneath them. He was 50 years old, a veteran of 3 wars, and he had commanded ships all his life. But nothing had prepared him for this. The Steadfast moved like no human vessel ever had. It responded to commands instantly. It turned and accelerated with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. "Running weapons test," Tyler Nash announced from his station. The display showed targets set up in orbit, old satellites that had stopped working years ago. The Steadfast's main cannon fired. A beam of blue-white energy crossed the distance in a heartbeat. The first satellite vanished, then the second, then all 6 remaining targets in rapid succession. Tyler checked his readings twice before speaking. "Weapons are operating at 130% of expected output. The hybrid core is feeding them more power than the original design ever could." Sam allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Jake had done more than just fix the alien ship. His team had improved it. They had built a warship. Humans had made it better. Kate waited in the fighter bay with her squadron. She had been a test pilot before Project Rebirth recruited her. Now she commanded 24 pilots who would fly the smaller craft that launched from the Steadfast. These fighters had been rebuilt from escape pods, modified with human cockpits and weapon systems that Amy had designed herself. Kate climbed into her fighter and ran through the startup sequence. The controls felt natural now, after months of training. She still remembered the first time she had sat in one of these machines. The alien seat had not fit her body. The displays had shown symbols she could not read. But piece by piece, the engineering team had transformed these pods into something human pilots could fly. "Squadron ready for launch," she reported. The fighters poured out of the Steadfast like a swarm of metal wasps. Kate led them through a series of combat drills, testing formations and attack patterns. They had never used their escape pods as weapons, but humans had looked at them and seen potential. Back on Earth, Martin sat in the communications center beneath Project Rebirth headquarters. She was 26 and had joined the project as a translator, helping Chris decode documents. But her real talent was listening. She had spent the past year intercepting signals from the approaching fleet. Most of the transmissions were routine, supply reports, navigation updates, but sometimes she caught something more personal, conversations between officers, jokes shared among crew members, and through those fragments she had learned what they truly thought of humanity. They called humans vermin, pests living on a rock too small to matter. The invasion was not even considered a real military operation. It was a cleanup job. They expected no resistance. They expected to arrive, crush whatever primitive defenses they found, and add Earth to their endless list of conquered worlds. Saved every transmission. She wanted the command team to understand exactly what they were facing. Not just ships and weapons, but an enemy that saw them as insects. The Scout arrived 3 weeks later. A small ship, faster than the main fleet, sent ahead to survey Earth's defenses. It dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Mars and began scanning the solar system. Sam called an emergency meeting. The original plan had been simple: wait for the main fleet, fight them with everything humanity had, but now there was an opportunity. "One ship," Sam said. "If we destroy it quickly, the fleet loses its eyes. They come in blind." Ben Torres shook his head. "Or we capture it. A ship is useful, but a prisoner who can tell us about enemy tactics is worth even more." The argument went back and forth for an hour. Finally, Lisa Vance spoke up from the corner of the room. "The Scout is already sending data back to the fleet. Destroying it will not make them blind, but capturing it gives us something we do not have right now: intelligence, real information from someone who has fought alongside the." Sam made the decision. The Steadfast launched that night. The capture operation was risky. The Scout was fast and its crew was trained for exactly this kind of situation. But Kate's squadron cut off its escape routes while the Steadfast disabled its engines with precision shots. Within 2 hours, the Scout was drifting helplessly in space, and a boarding team was cutting through its hull. The crew fought. They were larger than humans, with thick gray skin and arms that ended in clawed hands. But the boarding team had trained for months. One by one, the alien soldiers fell. 3 survived. 2 refused to speak, even after days of interrogation. But the third was different. He was an officer captured with a wound that human doctors were able to treat. And when he finally understood that he was going to live, he began to talk. His name was impossible for human tongues to pronounce, so they called him Gray. He told them about the Dominion, an empire that had conquered over 200 species across the galaxy. Entire civilizations wiped out or enslaved, planets stripped of resources and left as empty husks. And none of them ever fought back, Ben asked. Gray made a sound that might have been a laugh. Some fought, at the beginning, but the Dominion always won. After the first defeat, the conquered species learned to submit. Resistance only brought more death. Ben leaned closer. What if someone did not stop fighting? What if they kept coming, no matter how many times they lost? Gray stared at him with eyes that held no fear, only confusion. The question did not make sense to him. Every species that had ever faced eventually surrendered. The idea of endless resistance was something he had never considered. That night, Ben addressed the entire Project Rebirth staff. His speech was broadcast around the world. They have conquered 200 species, he said. 200 civilizations that gave up and bowed down. We are going to be the first ones who make them bleed. The first ones who show the galaxy that the Dominion can be beaten. When this is over, every conquered world will know our name. They will know that humans never surrender. The crowd roared, and somewhere in the darkness of space, the fleet continued its approach, unaware that everything was about to change. The fleet arrived on a Tuesday morning. 47 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel just beyond the orbit of Jupiter. At their center sat the throne of conquest, a vessel so large it made the others look like toys. Commander Al stood on its bridge and looked toward the distant blue dot that was Earth. He had conquered 11 worlds in his career. Each one had followed the same pattern, a show of force, a demand for surrender, then the quick, brutal destruction of anyone foolish enough to resist. After that came the occupation, the harvesting of resources, the enslavement of useful populations. It was clean and efficient, the way all Dominion operations were supposed to be. His communications officer opened a channel to Earth. Al's message was simple. Creatures of this world, you have something that belongs to the Dominion, a ship stolen by cowards. You will surrender it now, along with your planet and your lives. Resistance will result in extinction. You have 1 hour to respond. On the Steadfast, Sam listened to the transmission in silence. His crew waited for orders. The ship hummed around them, fully powered and ready for battle. Behind them, Earth glowed blue and green, unaware of how close it stood to destruction. Sam thought about responding. He thought about delivering some great speech that would echo through history. But in the end, he decided that words were not what mattered now. "Take us forward," he said. "All weapons ready." The Steadfast moved alone toward the fleet. 1 ship against 47, monitored enemy communications and heard the laughter spread through the Dominion vessels. The aliens found it amusing. A single ship crewed by primitives, sailing to its death. Al watched the approaching vessel with mild interest. He recognized the design. A warship, one of their heavier models, but something about it looked different. The hull had been modified. Strange additions had been welded onto the frame, and it was moving faster than any ship should. "Destroy it," he ordered. "1 volley should be enough." 5 ships opened fire. Energy beams crossed the darkness of space, converging on the point where the Steadfast should have been. But the human ship had already moved. It twisted and rolled with impossible grace, dodging the attack entirely. Then it fired back. The first ship exploded before its crew understood what was happening. The second lost its engines and began to drift. The third took a direct hit to its weapons array and went dark. Al stared at his display in disbelief. 3 ships damaged or destroyed in the first 30 seconds of combat. This was not possible. There had been a broken species, fleeing in terror. Their technology was inferior to Dominion systems. There was no way their ship could do this. But the Steadfast was not a ship anymore. It was something new, something that Jake and his team had built from the bones of alien failure. Kate launched with her squadron as soon as the battle began. 24 fighters poured from the Steadfast bays and scattered into the chaos. They had never seen craft like these before. Small and fast, they darted between the larger ships, striking at weak points and vanishing before the enemy could respond. Kate lined up her first target, a cruiser that was trying to flank the Steadfast. She fired her modified missiles and watched them slip through the enemy shields like the shields were not even there. Tyler Nash had spent months studying those shields. He had found the frequency that made them vulnerable. Now every human weapon was tuned to that exact frequency. The cruiser broke apart. Kate was already moving to her next target. Inside the Steadfast, alarms began to sound. The ship was winning, but it was also taking damage. Weapons found their mark more often as the enemy adjusted their tactics. Hull breaches opened on 3 decks. Power fluctuations rippled through secondary systems. Jake worked in the engineering section with his hands deep inside the power conduits. The hybrid core was holding, but it needed constant adjustment to keep up with the demands of combat. Beside him, Amy rerouted power from damaged sections to critical systems. An explosion threw Jake against the wall. He felt something crack in his chest and tasted blood in his mouth. Warning lights flashed everywhere. One of the secondary reactors had been hit. Amy pulled him to his feet. "You need medical attention." Jake shook his head. "The core needs me more." He stumbled back to his station and kept working. The pain was distant, unimportant. All that mattered was keeping the ship alive. On the command deck, Sam watched 11 vessels burn. His ship had done the impossible, but 36 enemies still remained, and they were no longer laughing. Al had ordered his entire fleet to focus on the Steadfast. The weight of fire was becoming overwhelming. Lisa Vance studied the enemy formation from her station. She had spent months learning tactics from their captured officer. She knew how they thought, how they organized their ships, and she had found a weakness. "Captain," she said, "their formation is built around the throne of conquest. All their coordination comes from that ship. If we can reach it, if we can take it out, the rest of the fleet will fall into confusion." Sam looked at the display. The command ship sat at the center of the enemy formation, protected by layers of warships. Getting to it would mean flying through the entire fleet. "Navigation," he said. "Plot a course straight through their center, all power to forward shields." The Steadfast accelerated. Weapons hammered against its shields as it pushed deeper into enemy territory. Explosions bloomed around the hull. Systems failed and were rerouted. The ship groaned under the stress of 100 simultaneous impacts. But it did not stop. It did not slow down. It punched through the formation like a fist through paper, leaving burning wreckage in its wake. When the Steadfast emerged on the other side, the throne of conquest filled Al's flagship, the heart of the Dominion fleet, and now there was nothing between it and the humans who had come to claim their vengeance. Sam allowed himself one moment to look at his crew. They were exhausted and wounded. Their ship was falling apart around them, but their eyes held the same fire that had burned in Jake, eyes on the night the ship first crashed. They had come too far to stop now. The Steadfast hung in space, broken and bleeding. Hull breaches covered its surface like wounds. Smoke poured from damaged sections. Power flickered through systems that were never designed to take this much punishment. The ship was operating at barely 40% capacity, and everyone aboard knew it. But they were still alive, and the throne of conquest was right in front of them. Jake opened his eyes in the engineering section. Medical officers had found him unconscious near the power core. His ribs cracked, and his left arm burned from an electrical surge. They had given him something for the pain and told him to rest. He ignored them and climbed back to his feet. Amy looked up from her console as he limped toward her. "You should be in the medical bay." "So should half the crew," Jake replied. "What is our status?" Amy ran through the damage reports. The main weapons were still functional. The hybrid core was holding, though it needed constant manual adjustment to keep from overloading. Life support was stable on most decks. Navigation and engines were operating at reduced capacity but could still move the ship. It was enough. It had to be enough. On the command deck, Al's face appeared on the main. The commander looked different now. The arrogance that had filled his voice at the start of the battle was gone. In its place was something that might have been fear, carefully hidden behind a mask of anger. "How?" he demanded. "You are primitives. Your species has barely learned to leave your own planet. How have you done this?" Sam stood before the screen with his hands clasped behind his back. His uniform was torn and stained with smoke. Blood dried on a cut above his eye, but his voice was steady. "You made a mistake," Sam said. "You and everyone else who looked at Earth and saw nothing worth respecting. You thought we were weak because we were young. You thought we would surrender because everyone else did, but we are not everyone else." He stepped closer to the screen. "They abandoned their ship on our world because they thought we were too primitive to matter. We took that ship and made it stronger than they ever imagined. Your empire has conquered 200 species. Today, you are going to learn what happens when you try to conquer the wrong one." Al cut the transmission. His remaining ships began to close around the Steadfast, forming a ring of weapons that would tear the human vessel apart in seconds. But Sam had expected this. "Amy," he said through the internal communicator, "now." In the engineering section, Amy activated the weapon that she and Jake had built in secret. It had no official name. The engineers just called it the Hammer, a modified pulse cannon connected directly to the hybrid core, designed to fire a single massive burst of electromagnetic energy. They had only enough power for one shot. If it failed, the Steadfast would be defenseless. But Amy had run the calculations 100 times. She knew it would work. The hammer fired. A wave of energy exploded outward from the Steadfast, washing over every ship in range. The effect was immediate and devastating. Alien systems went dark. Engines died. Weapons fell silent. 36 warships became 36 helpless hulks drifting in the void. Kate and her squadron had been waiting for this moment. They launched from the Steadfast's damaged bays and spread out among the disabled enemy vessels. One by one, they destroyed the ships that could not fight back. Explosions lit up the darkness like a field of dying stars. Only the throne of conquest remained. The flagship had been too large for the hammer to disable completely. Its systems were damaged but recovering. Al screamed orders at his crew, demanding that they restore power and destroy the human ship. But the Steadfast was already moving. Slow and wounded, trailing smoke and debris, it advanced on the command ship with terrible purpose. Martin had taken control of all communications in the area. She had jammed every channel, cutting Al off from any hope of calling for help. More importantly, she had opened a broadcast channel that reached every corner of the galaxy. Everything that happened now would be witnessed by every species the Dominion had ever conquered. Sam opened a final channel to Al. "This is your last chance," he said. "Surrender now. Return to your empire and tell them what happened here. Tell them that Earth is not prey. Tell them that if they ever come back, we will be ready." Al's response was a snarl of pure hatred. "You are animals, vermin. The Dominion will burn your world to ash and scatter your bones across the galaxy. I will never surrender to creatures like you." Sam nodded slowly. He had expected nothing else. "Then you will die like the others," he said, "and the galaxy will watch." The Steadfast fired everything it had left. Energy beams and missiles converged on the throne of conquest. The massive flagship tried to return fire, but its weapons were still struggling to come back online. The human attacks struck again and again, tearing through armor and bulkheads, ripping the ship apart from the outside in. The final explosion was visible from Earth, a brief new star that flared in the night sky and then faded to nothing. Confirmed that one small vessel had survived, a scout ship that had stayed at the edge of the battle, too far away for the hammer to reach. She had let it escape on purpose, carrying recordings of everything that had happened. The message would spread across the galaxy. 200 conquered species would learn that the Dominion could be beaten, that somewhere in a small corner of space, a primitive species had done what no one else had dared to do. The Steadfast limped home. It took 3 days to reach Earth, traveling at a fraction of its normal speed. Repair crews met it in orbit and began the long process of putting the ship back together. Jake was released from the medical bay 2 weeks later. His ribs had healed. His arm would need more time, but he could use it again. He walked out of the facility and stood in the Nevada desert where everything had begun. The ship had crashed here 6 years ago, a broken wreck abandoned by aliens who thought humans were worthless. Now that same ship orbited above the planet, battered but victorious. And beside it, construction had already begun on new vessels built from the same hybrid designs. Lisa Vance found him there, watching the stars come out. She stood beside him in silence for a long time before speaking. "The galaxy is going to change now," she said. "All those conquered species will hear what we did. Some of them might start fighting back." Jake nodded. "Good. The Dominion has had it too easy for too long." Lisa looked up at the lights moving across the sky, the Steadfast and its growing fleet of sister ships. They never imagined their broken ship would become this. Jake smiled. It was the first real smile he had allowed himself in years. They never understood what humans do with broken things. We fix them, we improve them, we make them our own, and then we use them to change everything. Above them, the stars waited. Humanity was no longer hiding on a small blue world, hopping to be ignored. They were going out to meet the galaxy on their own terms. And the galaxy would never be the same.